Good evening. We are here and ready to welcome you to the Q&A with Chris Dempsey, candidate for State Auditor. So welcome for folks that are just getting on with us, Facebook Live. This will also be posted to our YouTube channel in short order so that everyone can hear from our candidate for State Auditor. Do know that Diana DiZoglio is also a candidate, but she didn't return the ORMA questionnaire and therefore is no longer under consideration for endorsement. So welcome as folks are coming in. It is a gorgeous afternoon. This is Saturday, 5:30, May 14th, and it's lovely outside. So for those of you that are enjoying a little bit of vitamin D, we do hope that you'll be able to tune in after the sun goes down and get all your questions answered from Chris Dempsey. As folks come in, just please put your name in the chat, where you're coming in from, ORMA members, ORMA friends, ORMA revolutionaries. Hope you fall into all three categories. Welcome. In just a few moments, we'll get started. Chris Dempsey is with us, and we're really excited to be able to ask him a series of questions that both, coming from you in the chat. So as you're coming in, not only drop your name in the chat and where you're from and what ORMA affiliate, but if you have questions for the State Auditor, we're going to do as best we can to get to as many of your questions as possible. My name is Amanda Huggin-Moretti. I'm coming to you from the Our Revolution of Greater Fall River. So your neighbor down on the South Coast. I'm very happy to be with you for this important Q&A. As we get going, we're recording. So again, if you're able to tune in on YouTube, or you're tuning in on YouTube now, thanks for joining us. If you're on Facebook Live, thanks so much for being here. And very shortly, we're going to just get rolling so we give our candidate as much time as possible. Each question will be limited to about 2 minutes. So that way we'll just, in the interest of getting as much feedback and as much information, we'll try to keep those answers short, even though it's just one candidate that we're hearing from. So it's a privilege in that way. Okay, I'm just checking in. Let's see if I have anybody that's saying hello. Everything looks to be up and running. So I think if everybody's comfortable, we'll start our show. Chris, are you ready to go? We have that invocation that starts our ORMA meeting, and it's so important that we start that way. So if you're ready, please share that invocation with us.
Thank you, Amanda. We recognize that we meet this evening on lands taken from Indigenous people. We affirm our solidarity with Indigenous peoples, such as the Anishinaabe collection of North American tribes, as well as our more local brothers and sisters, tribes such as the Massachusetts, Mashpee, Pecumtuck, Wampanoag, and Narragansett peoples. We recognize that we live within the American capitalist system founded on slavery, a system that established a legacy of violence and selfish acquisition that includes mass shootings, racism, sexism, homophobia, support of oppressive foreign governments, and economic inequality. We stand with the working class in their rights to dignity, a living wage, and competitive benefits. Through forums like this one, we endeavor to educate the public on these complex issues by finding constructive solutions regarding a new way forward. You're on mute, Amanda.
Amanda, you're on mute.
No, she's trying to get off. So I think she wants us to go on. And so as one of the co-chairs of ORMA, I'm delighted to welcome you to the forum tonight. Welcome, Chris Dempsey. Thank you so much for making it. ORMA has our famous triangle. We want to build progressive powerhouses with our local affiliate, elect progressive champions who will continue to build our movement. We want to build a progressive party, and we work within the Democratic Party at this point. to make it progressive, and we want to win on progressive policies. We have two people asking questions, and actually we've done a little switcheroo. I'm going to be mostly doing the show flow, and Henry's going to be asking my side of the questions. And Robin Bergman, we're very lucky to have her here tonight. She's actually modeling some of her beautiful art textile work. She's also an intellectual and will be asking half the questions. So welcome again, Chris Dempsey, candidate for state auditor with a really impressive background, and it's exciting to get to our questions.
It's great to be here, Martha. Thanks for the opportunity.
Definitely. So Henry, do you want to ask the first question, and then we'll alternate with Robin?
Yes.
Do we need to introduce Chris first?
Oh,
Yes, sincere apologies.
Yeah.
I have having technical difficulties on this sunny day, so I'm popped back in. I will have to do this from memory, Chris, because all of my text is unavailable to me right now, but I do know that you went to Brookline Public Schools. You went to Pomona College and did your MBA at Harvard Graduate School or Harvard School of Business. What else do I know about Chris Dempsey that everyone needs to know? Has been elected to the Brookline Town Council since 2012, has a wonderful Mass DOT open data that he created as an initiative, worked for the Patrick administration. Oh gosh, if there's anything I'm leaving out from my memory, yeah, I think that'll do
Amanda,
it.
that's very good for memory. That's better
Stop
than I
the
can do
Olympics.
from memory.
Well, in that case, please take it away. And as I did share, my sincere apologies, we're trying to keep your responses to 2 minutes just because we want to get so many more questions in. So if you do hear me say 20 seconds, it'll just give you that heads up that we're nearing that 2-minute mark. Okay, thank you. Please introduce yourself, sir. 2-minute introduction.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Dempsey. I'm running to be your next state auditor. I'm the son of public school teachers. My parents met while teaching at the Martin Luther King School in Boston in 1970, and they were placed in adjoining classrooms and fell in love. And I saw through the course of their careers that they were digging into their own pockets to pay for school supplies for their students, as we know public school teachers do to this day across the Commonwealth. And when you see that firsthand, you ask basic questions about our public priorities and why we're spending dollars in some areas and not in others. And that has led me to a career in and around public service. I served as Assistant Secretary of Transportation for Governor Deval Patrick. While I was there, I co-founded the MassStop program that created all the smartphone apps that tell you in real time when your bus or your train will arrive. And I'm proud that we made the MBTA the very first transit agency on the entire East Coast to make those apps available to riders, and the regional transit authorities that provide bus service around the state followed soon after that. But I've also worked outside of government to protect the public interest as the co-founder of the grassroots No Boston Olympics, which took on the titans of industry that had pitched or hatched a plan behind closed doors that required that all of us as state taxpayers cover 100% of the cost overruns of that Olympic bid. That would have been billions and billions of our dollars spent on a 3-week sporting event instead of on public education, public health, transportation, healthcare, the environment, all these other urgent needs that we have. So I'm proud of that effort. We got outspent 1,500 to 1, but we had so many of you that were with us, and we had the facts on our side, and we pushed back against those corporate interests successfully. I think one of the great progressive victories in Massachusetts in the last decade, and it's because of so many of you. I live in the first floor of a triple decker in Brookline Village, about 2.5 blocks from where I grew up and where my public school teacher parents still live. I live here with my amazing fiance, Anna. We're getting married 2 weeks after the Democratic convention, so we've got a busy June coming up. But Anna and I are looking forward to starting a family together, and we want that to be in a Massachusetts that is the best that it can be. That means making state government the best that it can be, and that is why I'm running to be your next state auditor.
Thank you so much, Chris. Martha, are you on the first question?
I am.
Oh,
So
thank you,
Robin
Henry.
and I are going to go back and forth. So Chris, I apologize, but I'm going to start with a softball question, but I promise it's the last one. And the question is, what are the main changes you would make compared to what your predecessor did? What are the main changes to the auditor's role or priorities that you hope to bring to the office?
Well, Henry, I have great respect for Auditor Suzanne Bump. I think she's served the Commonwealth well over the course of her career as a state representative, as Secretary of Labor, and as state auditor for the last 12 years. But even she said in her statement about not running for re-election last year that she was excited to see what the next generation can do with the power of the auditor's office. I think that this office can be a robust platform for change and advocacy within state government. I'm proud that our campaign was the first in this race to put out a policy plan about what we wanted to actually do in the office. In fact, we put out the first 3 before any other campaign put out their first. Our first was on tracking federal stimulus dollars. Our second was on climate and environmental justice. And our third was on reform of the Massachusetts State Police. And I hope that we can dig into the details of all of those plans over the course of this conversation. But I think that will give you a sense of the breadth of this office. It can cover everything from climate change and how we're going to tackle that global issue here in Massachusetts to hiring practices or evidence handling practices at the Massachusetts State Police. It really covers the breadth of especially the executive branch of state government. And I am eager to roll up my sleeves to do that work and to build a more progressive, a more fair, a more equitable Commonwealth through that process.
Thank you so much. Martha.
No, Robin.
Robin, pardon me.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for being here tonight. You indicated as one of your priorities that you will make climate one of those priorities. Can you give specific examples of how you'll use the audits to further climate policies and goals?
I'm really excited about what we can do with the power of the state auditor's office on climate. And I encourage people to go to dempseyforauditor.com/climate to learn more. I am proposing that we will make the office the first in the country to incorporate carbon accounting into our audits of state agencies. And that will allow us to hold those agencies accountable for the laws that are on the books that require them to reduce emissions. I promise you that we will be the first in the country to do this, but we will not be the last. When we start it here in Massachusetts, it will become a national model. And that's really how we win on climate, not just drive emissions in Massachusetts down to 0, but have other states follow our lead. So I'm excited about that proposal. It's gotten a great response from many who have read it and dug in. But it's not just about reducing emissions. We also need to be tackling environmental justice, and we need to put that at the center of our policies. And I'm proposing to create an Auditor's Commission on Environmental Justice, which will be the first time in Massachusetts history that the Auditor's Office has done this. We'll bring together voices from across the Commonwealth to have a seat at the table on Beacon Hill as we are conducting these audits, considering recommendations for how to make things better. Because just as bad as our climate crisis is our public health crisis related to climate change and carbon emissions and the co-pollutants of carbon emissions. We know, for example, that people that live near busy highways have higher rates of asthma and heart disease, even of Alzheimer's and dementia. And we also know, and this is largely due to historic racism and structural racism, that you are more likely to be a person of color if you live near a highway in Massachusetts. So our issues of racial equality, environmental justice, public health are all intertwined, and we can tackle that through the power of the Auditor's Office.
Thank you so much. Henry? You're on mute, Henry.
Right. So there are a couple of related questions, and I'll ask the first of these. You have indicated that you believe in grassroots support and are concerned about conflicts of interest. Will you refuse campaign funds from developers and real estate entities? If not, why not?
So I'm really proud, Henry, of the grassroots campaign that we are running. We have over 1,500 individual contributors, which is by far the most in the race. We have raised more than our opponent in total in the Democratic primary at a far lower average contribution size. And so I'm, again, really proud of that grassroots support. It's not just financial, of course, it's also the grassroots organization that we've built. We're one of the few statewide campaigns this cycle that has collected all 5,000 of its required signatures without hiring paid signature gatherers. We've done that all through volunteer efforts. Grassroots campaigning is the only way I know how to campaign. I'm a student of the Deval Patrick campaign in 2006, the work that I did with No Boston Olympics, and I'm proud that that's the effort that we're running. I have maybe a vision for what Massachusetts can and must be on housing and housing equity that does include that we create more housing. And I want to be very clear here. That means more housing of all kinds. It means public housing, social housing, capital A affordable housing, lowercase a affordable housing, and market rate housing. And because of that, I think that there are some who work to develop real estate, whether that's in the nonprofit or the for-profit world, who can be our allies in creating more equitable housing policies across Massachusetts. And I appreciate that maybe not everybody agrees with that stance in that position, but I truly believe that we have to have more equitable housing across Massachusetts, and that part of that is going to be the creation of more housing, again, of all kinds. So that's my perspective on it, is that there are certainly real estate interests, landlords, developers who are nefarious, who are out there solely to extract dollars, but I don't believe that everybody fits that category. I think there are people out there who are part of building communities, and that's my position on that industry, not as a whole maybe, but as individual parts.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Robin?
So following up to the previous questions, in your response to the questionnaire, you said we need everyone at the table to address the climate crisis and to achieve environmental justice. However, I have not solicited campaign contributions from fossil fuel linked PACs or employees of large fossil fuel companies. But you also took no position rather than say you would refuse those donations. Why do you think it's okay to get financial support from the industry?
So Robin, I tried to be thoughtful on this question, and you will not find a greater champion on climate and environmental issues running for statewide office in Massachusetts than me this year. I'll just give you, one example. I'm someone who's going to ride transit to the State House, and I'll be the first statewide public official to commute to Beacon Hill by transit since Mike Dukakis left office in 1991. It's been 30 years. But there have been a small number of contributions, and I'm thinking of one in particular that I think a critic could link to the fossil fuel industry, and I'll be very explicit about this. I've accepted a contribution from a person named Elias Audi. He's a first-generation American from Lebanon, came over with nothing in his pocket, and he started a small but successful set of gas stations and auto repair places in my hometown. In fact, his gas station is at the end of the street that I grew up on, and it's about 2 blocks away from where I live now. He's been deeply rooted in the Brookline community. He contributes a percentage of everything that he takes in, all of his revenue, to the Brookline Community Foundation. And I did ask him for a contribution. He's not a large fossil fuel company or executive, but because he owns a gas station, I felt that it would be unfair for me to say that I'm refusing those contributions when I have accepted his contribution. So I tried to be technical with my answer to that question. And I hope that this explanation, provides some context and some background for him. He's someone I'm proud to be supported by as a first-generation American and someone who's served our community and been a member of my community for decades.
Thank you. Henry?
Right. So I want to give you a moment to expand on what you just said before asking my next question. But would you refuse from the actual manufacturers of fossil fuels?
Yes.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. There is an ongoing campaign to have the state divest from fossil fuel investments, like retirement funds invest there. As an auditor, would you support that campaign, and how would you do it?
So I have a couple thoughts here. To be very clear on this, the auditor does not have a role or an impact or a say on how those funds are invested. We do audit the PRIM and the various pension boards that exist in Massachusetts, but only on their operations, not on their investments. So we audit, are they getting their payments out in time? Do they have the right legal practices in place? We do not audit their portfolios, and that's excluded from the auditor's purview. So the impact I can have is less of a technical impact and more of a bully pulpit impact. I will say this: there are sort of two perspectives on how to best push these companies, and we've seen just within Massachusetts two different ways to approach it. Treasurer Deb Goldberg has taken a slightly different approach from divestment that I think also has some merit, at least for a conversation. I don't think it's my preferred route, but it has some merit for conversation. And what she's saying is essentially, we're going to use the power that we have from our investments in these companies to win seats on their boards and to force these companies to be more responsive to climate change. Now, I think some healthy skepticism is fair on that those companies are really going to be moved or changed. And we can have that debate about which technique is more effective. But I want to be very clear, we can absolutely not be passive investors in these companies and think that number one, it's good public policy, or number two, it's good investment. Because our public policy needs to be pushing us away from fossil fuels, entirely away from fossil fuels. And so if that's the case, those are not good investments to make. That's my perspective on this. You will see me as an ally and a champion on climate and on making sure we're pushing the private sector and the public sector to be better on climate.
Thank you so much. Robin?
So changing subjects a little bit, but also one of your priorities. Can you talk a little bit more about your plans to audit the state police to clean it up and make it more responsive and responsible?
I'm really proud of this plan, and I encourage people to read it on our website. It's a 15-point plan. It also received coverage from Adrian Walker in the Boston Globe. And so if you want kind of the shorthand version of it, his column is a really, I think, an effective one at describing why he thinks it's a plan that can work. It covers everything from hiring practices to promotions, to training, to evidence handling, to looking at racial profiling and stops, to looking at the state police use of privileged information systems like the Corey background check system, where there's evidence that some who have access to that system in the state police have been using it to check up on their landlords or on the new boyfriends of their ex-girlfriends, which are not appropriate uses of that system. The auditor is just one of 3 positions elected statewide that have oversight of the state police, along with the governor and the attorney general. We have not seen enough leadership on Beacon Hill in reforming that institution. It's been resistant to change, resistant to transparency, and the auditor can have a significant impact on pushing it forward. I want to be clear that I have respect for our troopers on the front lines. Over the course of this campaign, I have met not one, but 2 families who have lost a member of their family who was serving as a state police member and killed in the line of duty. So it's a serious and a tough job, but I believe that that institution, unfortunately, as a whole, has lost faith and trust with the public. And I want to be a part of restoring that faith and trust while making it a more transparent and accountable organization.
Thank you so much. Henry?
Right. Continuing with aspects of social justice, do you support a moratorium on the construction of new prisons? For instance, a proposal to build a new $52 million prison for women is under consideration now. Do you think it should be built?
I do not think it should be built, and I do support a moratorium. By national standards, Massachusetts does somewhat well on rates of incarceration compared to other states. By international standards, we're pretty abysmal. And we need to be taking a more comprehensive approach and reform approach to criminal justice and to incarceration. There's a lot to do there. There's great work that's been done with coalitions over the years to get good bills forward and passed, but there's more to be done. But I would like to see our incarceration rates continue to drop. I just heard, I was in Woburn recently for a house party, and a woman who attended that event is a nurse practitioner at youth incarceration facilities that are operated by DYS. And she told me that over the last decade, their numbers have gone down from about 4,000 children to about 400 children. That is an incredible change. It's an auspicious change. And that's the kind of change and movement that we need in juvenile incarceration and in adult incarceration. So I'm a supporter of continued pushing and reform and change on criminal justice. And I do not believe that it's a good use of taxpayer dollars to be investing in prisons.
Thank you. Any follow on, Henry?
No, we're good.
Thank you. Robin?
So staying on the subject of policing and related issues, do you support abolishing civil asset forfeiture, and what can you do as auditor to reform or abolish it?
Robin, I think that this is the first question I've had on civil asset forfeiture over the 11 months of the campaign. And so I've gotten a lot of questions on a lot of subjects. I probably want to just learn a little bit more about the issue before making a declarative statement. I know enough about it to know that it is often used to really be almost a non-judicial form of punishment for people, and that those assets are often used improperly when they are seized. So I'm open to the discussion there. I'm open to further conversation about how the state auditor's office can play a role in doing that. But I want to be just a little careful about making too declarative a statement on it, because it's not something that I've personally dug in on much in my career or over the course of this campaign.
Well, I'll just say we're 46th in the nation, pretty down there, and you know, there's no accountability. So I know there's a study committee in the legislature looking at it to try to decide what to do about it. But that's something that could use auditing.
I appreciate you raising it, and I look forward to learning more about it and being an ally on this issue. Let me stop there, but I appreciate you raising it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also just want to draw attention to the chat. So it would appear in some cases that police forces seek to use civil asset forfeiture as a profit center. So maybe something to follow up on as the campaign pushes forward, Chris. Thank you. Henry.
Right. So Chris, you've committed to doing town halls with incarcerated constituents. How will you proactively engage with people behind the wall and help them to shape public policy?
Well, Henry, I think those voices are really important in our public policy decisions. You know, there are folks who are incarcerated who have made some mistakes, who I'm sure have some regrets about some of the decisions that they've made. But we as a society need a criminal justice system and incarceration system that offers people an opportunity to pay their debt to society, but then to leave incarceration in a position where they can be productive members of society, contributing members of society, and that they're not emotionally or physically scarred by their experience behind bars, so to speak. And so I think I have a lot to learn from people who are behind bars about how they're being treated, about opportunities that they see to improve a criminal justice system that we know does not treat people well, does not set them and all of us as a society up for success when they do leave bars, behind bars. So I've got a lot to learn, and I look forward to being a state auditor who goes to those facilities and listens and learns and uses those learnings to build a better and a stronger and more equitable Commonwealth for all of us, including people who are incarcerated.
Thank you. Robin?
We were surprised to read in your Progressive Massachusetts questionnaire that you are not squarely in favor of Medicare for all or single payer. Did we understand that right? And would you consider auditing the administrative overhead of health insurance, which contracts with the state to deliver mass health or state subsidized health services? Many health economists agree that the 20% of revenue private health insurances pay for administration compares unfavorably to Medicare, where the administration cost is around 3%.
So the evidence on single payer healthcare from other industrialized companies countries, I should say, is very compelling and very clear, and it is absolutely the kind of fundamental reform and change and maybe even revolution conversation that we need to have as a Commonwealth and as a country about how inefficient, ineffective, inequitable our current healthcare system is. My preference, if we're going to have, when we have that conversation, as we have that conversation, is to have it as a national conversation, because I do think it will be a more politically effective and possible or pragmatic approach when we think about it at a national level, because of how much the federal government impacts healthcare spending and outcomes. The role I'm running for is focused on reform and oversight of the mass health system, the Medicaid system. That's the main way that we touch healthcare. But you're absolutely right, Robin, in your question, that there may be some opportunity to also review or audit or oversee private insurers who are effectively vendors to state government. I'm not aware that a state auditor has done that before, and it's something that I will consider and look into to see if we have the legal authority to do that in some way. You can think of me as someone who will be an ally in advancing conversations on more comprehensive, universal, equitable, and yes, even public run or government run healthcare systems. And so I'm trying to provide a little bit of a nuance in that answer. But I stand by the language I put in the Progressive Mass questionnaire and what I've shared with you so far today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Henry?
So this is somewhat related with respect to healthcare. My understanding is that the governor often pays for consultant services which are not scrutinized by the public and perhaps not even by the legislature. For instance, I was surprised to learn that Governor Baker hired McKinsey Consulting to administer some of the public health aspects of the COVID pandemic. They are known to step in and deliver services that used to be delivered by government. Would you help keep the public aware of these private contracts, and if these expenses are out of line with best public administration practices?
Yes. I've seen this in my work in transportation, where Governor Baker has relied pretty heavily on McKinsey to do some work and some studies on kind of the future of commuting and the future of transportation patterns. And taxpayers paid a lot of money for those studies, and I'm not sure we got very good outcomes at all for them. And that's an area of real expertise for me. I shouldn't say I'm not sure. I know we didn't get good outcomes for our dollars, good value for our dollars there. So absolutely, I will be auditing, as your next state auditor, I will be auditing all or some of those contracts, probably starting with the most substantial ones and the ones that had the greatest impact, including the ones related to COVID. I've worked in the public sector and in the private sector. And I've been on the side of the public sector where we've worked with vendors, we've worked with third parties, and I've also been one of those third parties that's worked with government. What I've seen is that far too often in administration, frankly, Republican or Democratic, but maybe especially Republican, is eager to outsource those services, to outsource those jobs, really without very good justification. And often we're better off keeping those services in-house and with the public sector. Is a long answer, but I'll just finish with this. The auditor has an important role to play in what's called the Pacheco Law, or the Mass Taxpayer Protection Act, which basically certifies outsourced or privatized proposals. And so we can be kind of a check on, I will be a check on the next administration to ensure that we are not unnecessarily privatizing work that can and should be done by public sector employees.
Thank you. Robin?
Yes, you've talked about your experience working in the Office of Transportation and the work that you did with the T. What role can the auditor's office play in addressing both the huge impending deficits, past concerns about proper use of funds, and meeting the goal of low or no cost public transit?
Well, I'm sorry we're limited to a 2-minute answer here, because I could do a couple hours on public transportation improvements and transportation more broadly. It's a place where I've spent a lot of my time. You heard me say I'll be the first statewide elected official to take transit to Beacon Hill. I was on the Green Line today. I am a regular transit rider and MBTA rider, and I'm concerned even for some of the basic safety at the MBTA. We saw the federal government has had to step in for a review of basically unprecedented review of MBTA safety systems. So there's a lot we can do here. I think public transit is absolutely essential to the future of the Commonwealth for reducing traffic congestion, for improving our public health, especially for reducing our climate impacts. And the auditor actually is a team that is essentially dedicated to oversight of the MBTA. I want that to be a robust and dynamic group. And there's a couple of big projects that we'll look into to start. One is the automated fare collection system, which started out as a $700 million project and is now a $1 billion project. It has $300 million of cost overruns. The other is the procurement of the red and orange line cars, which are being assembled in Springfield, but which are behind schedule and which have had some safety issues and concerned they're being manufactured by a Chinese rail company, state-owned Chinese rail company. We need to look into those large projects, each of which are now $1 billion projects. So just on the final part of your question on free and reduced transit, I am a huge fan of the conversation that I think we should largely credit Mayor Wu for starting around free transit and free MBTA. When you walk into the Boston Public Library under those grand doors in Copley Square, chiseled into the stone there, it says free for all. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't say the same thing at the Copley Square MBTA station, which is half a block away from the Boston Public Library. You will see in my response though to this questionnaire and the Progressive Mass questionnaire, just a little bit of caution, because I also know how important it is that we have revenue to support the MBTA. And so I think the bolder, longer term vision of free transit is a really compelling one. And I applaud Mayor Wu for starting it. It's going to take some time to get there. And I think things like low income fares or rethinking our fare policies is a great thing to do, is a good sort of first set of steps. I think Mayor Wu is approaching it incrementally in exactly the right way that she should, by starting with bus lines. And I'm excited by the conversation that's been started.
Thank you. I'll just share that we're about 10 minutes out from your closing statement. And so thank you so much for being thoughtful about your 2-minute time so that we can get to more of our members' questions. Henry, back to you.
Right. So this is a broader political question. Recent polling indicates that in Massachusetts and elsewhere, a significant proportion of young people, working class people, and members of communities of color are losing faith in the ability of the Democratic Party to deliver on its promises of an increased standard of living and better quality of their lives for them. What does the party in this state need to do to change this?
Well, that is a great question, Henry. That is a kind of a strategic political question in some ways that I don't know that I've gotten on this campaign. I'm going to give the way I want to answer that is to talk about, I think, two things. One is we need to be putting out the bold vision, and we just talked about Mayor Wu and her vision for free transit, her vision for a Green New Deal for Boston. It's exciting to see other statewide candidates running for office in Massachusetts that are putting out big and bold plans for what our Commonwealth can be. I think that needs to be tied to effective government and delivery of public services. And I think the auditor's office can really help with both, because it is one of 6 statewide elected officials. It has this ability to use that bully pulpit to talk about some of our bigger goals as a Commonwealth. And you've heard me talk about that with climate and carbon accounting and helping us drive to zero emissions. But it's also a job where you roll up your sleeves and you dig into what in the context of a $50 billion state budget feel like smaller items, a $500,000 grant to a YMCA or a social service nonprofit. But that work is really important too, because if you don't get those details right and those basics right, then people aren't going to trust that you can deliver that bigger, bolder vision. And so it's not an incrementalist approach, but it's a pragmatic approach to say we have to deliver for people in the small ways so that they can trust us to deliver in the bigger ways. And I'm running for this office to do that in the way that I think I can do that as someone that has experience inside of government, in the public sector, and especially at the grassroots level.
Thank you very much. Robin?
Yes. How will you make your efforts as auditor? Wait, let me rephrase this. Sorry. How will you make the auditor's office more accessible and responsive to immigrant constituents and community groups?
There's a lot we need to do there. We need to be putting out these audits in more languages, especially some of the key audits. We need to also reach people where they are. I'm very aware that most people do not have the auditor's office as the homepage of their web browser, and they're not, checking out our latest audit every day. And so we have to be proactive about reaching out to people, whether that's online through social media, whether that's delivering printed out versions or copies of some of our audits to public libraries around the state, or just engaging more with community events, and then also welcoming people to the table on Beacon Hill. You heard me talk about creating an auditor's commission on environmental justice, and that will truly bring in voices from Pittsfield to Provincetown to Chelsea to Fall River, who are on the front lines of the climate crisis, who are experiencing the impacts of severe weather, experiencing those co-pollutants that come out of our tailpipes or out of our power plants, and make sure that their voice is heard at the very heights and top of Beacon Hill. I'm committed to doing that. I think it's not only the fair and the equitable thing to do, I think it's actually a way to get better government for all of us when we hear those voices and include them. So there's a lot we have to do. And I look forward to being a partner with many of you who are working at the community and grassroots level to make sure we're doing that.
Thank you. Henry?
Okay, so as I understand it, the Office of the Auditor is responsible, amongst other things, for conducting audits, investigations, and studies to promote accountability and transparency that would thereby improve the performance and make state government work better. However, our state legislature is infamous as being arguably the least transparent legislature in the country. Now, I understand the legislature makes its own rules and not the auditor. I do understand that. But do you think that this is in general a problem? And given that you would have visibility as auditor and some responsibility for transparency, can you do anything, or do you anticipate being able to do anything to address this issue?
Well, of course it's a problem. And I've seen how it's a problem. I've seen it in my work with No Boston Olympics, where a $15 billion proposal that was going to shape the next decade of public investment in our Commonwealth was being decided almost entirely behind closed doors without any real true accountability or transparency on those decisions. In that case, the private bidders actually claimed that they were just a private nonprofit until they didn't have to share any information, despite the fact that they were literally setting out a public agenda for the next decade. We pushed back on that eventually with the help of people like City Councilor Tito Jackson, who threatened to subpoena. We forced Boston 2024 to make that information more transparent. And we made that process a much more public one than it was going to be because of our public pressure. I've also seen it in my work running Transportation for Massachusetts, which is the coalition that I led before leaving to run for state auditor. It was hard for us to understand what was happening with bills that we supported. There were committee votes that were not made public. All you know is the outcome. You don't know how individual reps or senators voted on those bills. There's really no excuse for that. That needs to be changed. And while you're right, Henry, that the auditor cannot change those rules and there are constitutional limitations in terms of what the auditor can do, I want to use all of our power that we can, up to that limit and up to that line. I'm not interested in running for this office to spark a constitutional crisis between the auditor's office and the legislature. We've got more important work to do on the basics, but I want to use all of that authority up to that line and also use that bully pulpit to push for more transparency and accountability broadly on Beacon Hill and across state government. And that's why I'm running for this job.
Thank you. Robin.
So I think this may be the last question. I was just wondering, I think the auditor also works with municipalities on voting and elections and things. What role do you foresee playing working with municipal entities?
So I'm the only candidate in this race with experience working at the municipal level. I've been an elected town meeting member since 2012. I was just reelected 2 weeks ago in a majority minority district and precinct in Brookline. And we are the first precinct level delegation that is majority people of color representing us in town meeting. And we believe in the history of Brookline. So very proud of that. I also served as the chair of the Brookline Transportation Board, and I've overseen hundreds of hours of tedious public meetings with debates about where bike lanes should go and where stop signs should go and what parking meter rates should be. But that really is such an important level of government. And I truly believe that. The auditor runs a group within its purview called the Division of Local Mandates. And what we do is, that group does is we assess the impacts on municipal budgets of legislative changes. And so the reason that you're tying that to voting in this case is because when voting laws or access changes, that does have financial impacts on municipalities. And understandably, if you are a clerk in a small town in Massachusetts with a very limited budget, and the legislature says, well, we want you to now have early voting for an extra 10 days, that has an impact on your budget and your resources. And it's the auditor's job to be a little bit of a referee here. I think I'm uniquely positioned to do that because I have worked at the local level, but I'm also completely and fully committed to more accessible voting. I've seen the power of same-day registration, for example, as a campaign volunteer for the Obama campaign in 2008 in New Hampshire. You want someone in this role who can be that fair referee that knows where we're trying to go as a Commonwealth, but also respects the impacts that these changes can have on municipal governments, whether it's voting or any other law. That's the sort of wisdom and judgment that I want to bring to this office based on my experience, and that's the role that the auditor can play.
Thank you so much. It's just about time for us to wrap up. So we want to thank you for taking the time to address all the members' questions and giving us some insights into how you would approach the role of state auditor. Maybe have your 2-minute closing statement.
Yeah. Well, it's been an honor to be a part of this conversation and a part of this process. I would be honored to earn our Revolution Massachusetts endorsement in this race. We would proudly tout that endorsement if we were to win it. I'm proud to be endorsed and supported by some of the folks that your local chapters have supported and really championed. And in particular, I know in Medford, the chapter there has been really great about electing folks to the city council. And we are supported, my campaign is supported by what's called the progressive majority of the Medford City Council, Zach Bears and Nicole and Kit and Justin, all of whom are wonderful leaders and really kind of the next generation of progressive leaders in Massachusetts who are investing their time at the local level. I'm honored to have their support. As I said, we are a true grassroots campaign with over 1,500 individual contributors. We are working in every single corner of the Commonwealth. We had an organizing meeting in February where we had a representative from all 40 Senate districts. We're one of the few statewide campaigns that could say that in February, that we had that statewide reach. And I would be honored to have you as part of that team and to be an ally to you in state government in the years ahead. We need more progressive voices on Beacon Hill. We need more folks who have done that grassroots work and are ready to roll up their sleeves to make state government more accountable, more efficient, more transparent, more equitable. I want to be that partner to you. And again, it's been great to talk with you all today and be a part of this process. So thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Thanks to the ORMA members for your questions. Thanks to those of you who are viewing this on YouTube and on Facebook Live for coming and making sure that you're hearing from the candidate. So we also are strong when our members take action. And so here's some actions that you can take following the session. Protecting public forests, you see the link there. We are looking for folks to write in letters. Also community immunity. We are a lot less immune in our public schools than we might think. So a lot of enforcement that's a little bit lax there. So we could hope to bolster that. A more democratic party. So please read the cover letter that's being sent out and add your name if you agree that we should increase the democratic nature of our Democratic Party statewide. And also the Fair Share Amendment, advocacy is ongoing and that's on the ballot or is coming up in November. So please lend your support there and act now. We are very grateful to all of you. So please know that we have a couple of more forums coming up. We're very excited to be welcoming Quentin Palfrey. Forgive me, please. I'm just making sure I have all our names right. Shannon Liss-Riordan and Andrea Campbell, candidates for statewide office for Attorney General. So those separate sessions are coming up May 17th and 21st. Please check your inbox and invitations. Remember to send us your most insightful questions so that we can hear from you and hear from the candidates. Thank you again for being with us. We really appreciate the whole team at ORMA that is putting on these Q&A sessions and of course, again, the candidates that join us, and we can't do it without the membership. So have a wonderful evening and we hope to see you again soon on May 17th and May 21st.